All right, Rockfin, let's go. And here we go.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right, guys, welcome. Happy Monday. Nope, happy Tuesday. Got my days mixed up. I know I wasn't here last night. I just got back from Camp Dada yesterday. So I'm pumped. I'm energized. I'm excited. Missed you guys, but I'm back here. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, with the exception of this week. Tomorrow, I have a very, very special live stream that I'm going to tell you guys about later on. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter, doing the damn thing. And I want to give shout outs to people in the chat. What's going on, Anon user? Communism or extinction? Choose wisely. Shout out to Hannah G, says Sabby with a smile. Greetings, Robert, says doobie-doobie-doo. What's going on, Jay? Industry rule number 4080. Record company people are shady. I like that. Shout out to Leo. Money is an illusion. Greg, what is up? Who's a Sabby member, says, hey, lefty peeps. What's going on? Monique says, greetings from Germany. Looking forward to hearing about Camp Dada. Whoop, 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 whoop. Shout out to Chilla Nasara, says, hola, compas. Greeting Aspen Fallen, says, I canvassed for Bernie twice despite having crippling social anxiety. Ain't gonna do it again. What's going on? The Traveler says, I'm more than open to giving my time for a leftist candidate outside the DNC. Ooh. Guys, if you haven't done so, make sure you take that poll. I'm going to reveal the results at the end when we get to that story. Shout out to Rodrigo. Krystal's entire argument rallied on 10K student debt forgiven, but Washington Post gave the game away. SCOTUS may strike it down. I've heard about that, Rodrigo. What's going on? Mary says, hi, Sabby, and all the good Sabsters. Shout out to Aspen Fallen. She's got her little, she or he has their little volcanoes erupting there. Greetings, Leroy, who's a Sabby member, says, peace. Shout out to Crazy Boy. Hey, y'all. What's going on? Terry says, hello, fam. Greetings, Darth Keikos. Says, nice. Nice. There's a skit by Key and Peele where they make fun of people doing that. And they actually end up saying noise. They're like, noise. Shout out to Joe, says, hi, perfect people. Greetings, the other Joe. LOL, inside game. Shout out to Saul, none of the above. Poll, I say revolution will be the only path. Greetings, Robert, says doobie-doobie-doo. What's going on, Yasmin? Hey, y'all. Happy Tuesday. Great to see you after the long break, Sabby. Feels great to be back. What's going on? Want to see more, says hello, fam. Shout out to Mark Pugsley. Sabby, Trotsky tells us that between the revs of 1917, the Russian people formed Soviets that overtook the provisional government. He called it dual power. What's going on? Sean says, yo. Shout out to Eric T. Red, who's a Sabby member, says, happy Big Tuesday, all. Greetings, Angela says, hey to all. Hope you are having a great time camping, Sabby. I did. Shout out to Theron. Absolutely will never donate to any Democrat, no matter how progressive. You guys hear this? This is where a lot of people are at now. Shout out to Bryce. Hello, everyone. Greetings, Ashura. 3% want to try the inside game. Haven't you had enough? Or are you a glutton for punishment? Ouch. Shout out to CBC voter. I'm from Canada. Happy Tuesday, Sabby Sabs. Greetings to Monique in London. Hello, Sabby, and everyone from the failed state of the UK. Oh, man. Greetings, Desiree. Good evening, everyone. Shout out to Bad Cookies. Wow. I actually got a YouTube alert for Sabby's show. That's a first. Yeah. That's why I don't rely on that. That's why I try to tell you guys to sign up for the newsletter, because YouTube's all over the place. And hit the like. That's right. That helps me with the algorithm. Hit that like button for me there. Give it a Hulk smash. Shout out to Allie. Destroy the system and the corrupt politicians. Here you go. Paul. Canvas for communism. We're going to get into a good discussion about that tonight. Shout out to Where a Pilgrim says, hey, everybody. What's going on? Kaladin says, finally catching Sabby. Low. What's going on? Miguel says, peace. And I want to give a shout out here to Steve, who says, hello, everyone. And Greetings Gamer, who also says, hello. Let's go ahead. I think there is a shout out there on Rockfin as well. Shout out to Roy O'Neill. Happy Tuesday at Sabby Sabs. Thank you so much, Roy. Sabby's back in the house. Yeah. So back from Camp Dada. Great event. Big shout out to the Bank Sisters and Lucy, who really did a phenomenal job putting that event together. I do have a lot of video footage I need to edit. I'm going to put that together, and then you guys will be able to see some of the activities that we did at Camp Dada. And you'll also see that we did skill sharing. I thought that was really important as well. I learned a lot from activists all over the country. People came from Texas and Florida. It wasn't just people right here on the East Coast. And everybody was able to give their input about what they're doing or what they could be doing in their communities to help people. And I feel like these are the kind of events that we should be doing, that we should be promoting, because at the end of the day, electoral politics is only going to get us so far, right? So we have to connect with people who are organizing and other activists as well. And if you're not an organizer or not an activist, when I put this video together, you'll still be able to take things from it and say, well, who do I know in my state or my community that is an activist and organizer, and maybe reach out to them and see if you can get some of those things going in your community. So definitely great time. Again, I can't tell you guys, like when I got back, I just felt so motivated, so energized. And it's kind of reminds me when I worked in higher ed, we used to do these retreats like once a year. And every now and then you have like these lull moments when you're working for, especially the same company for so long. And it's easy to get set in your routine, right? Then you would have that retreat, and that would energize you, is supposed to energize you and motivate you to do something different, inspire you. And that's how I feel coming back from Camp Dada. And I haven't felt this way in a while. And I think it was really good for me to be there. So hopefully I'll be able to do a recap with them as well about what we think went well, what we would change. But I got to tell you, like, they put together a phenomenal event, getting all these people together from across the country in one location. So I finally got the opportunity to see people in person that I've never met in person. What was that, Steve? Who was there that we would know? The Bank Sisters were there. They were the main organizers. And so was Lucy from Indie News Network. They were the main organizers. So there's other activists too. You guys will see the video when I get that all together. But Delilah, who is running for governor of Texas through the Green Party, Delilah was there. She's freaking awesome. everyone is even more, I would say, revolutionary in person than they are online. And we learn so much from each other. So definitely a great event. Oh, what was that, Eric? His name is Rory. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Rory. You're watching on Rockfin. Okay. Yeah, Eric, if you can go to the camp.is site, the Twitter site, and put the link in the private chat, I can show them some of the pictures. But let's go ahead and get into the topics that we are going to discuss tonight. I want to go ahead and share my thumbnail here. Okay. I was gone for a minute, but now I'm back and a lot has happened. It's been a while. It's been a while. All right, tonight we are discussing Briahna Joy Gray and Krystal Ball debate. Oh, there's so much revealing there. I feel like that is definitely a mask off moment. We're going to get into that. I'm also going to discuss Richard Wolff communism. Ignore and remove everything that you thought you knew about communism. Richard Wolff is going to break that down, and I think he does a really good job of that. And last but not least, I'm also going to discuss the Prague protests over oil, which also happened over the weekend. And I think we need to be paying close attention. I told you guys last week to what is happening in Europe in reference to the oil situation and how it will affect them this winter. So let's go ahead and get started with our first story here. Oh, oops, nope. Patrons. Gone for one day and I start to forget things. Okay. Shout out to everyone who's a Sabby patron. If you are interested, I have 5 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate guys. They are here doing the damn thing. Shout out to all of you. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names listed on the bottom of the screen there, scrolling across on that ticker. And I want to give a quick shout out to a new Sabby patron, Mary A. Leck. Give it up for the newbies. Whoop, whoop. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really helps me out. Uh-oh. Okay. I clicked on the wrong thing. Oh, no, I didn't. I forgot to close that window. Really helps me out. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the first story. Now, we talked about the oil and the energy crisis situation that is happening in Europe because of the conflict that is going on between Russia and Ukraine. And Europeans are speaking out, and they were very vocal over the past couple of days. Multiple protests occurred. I do want to focus on one in particular, which is the protest in Prague. But what exactly is going on with OPEC that started all this to begin with? Let's go ahead and discuss this piece here. Let's go into this article. Okay. OPEC makes small trim to world oil supplies as prices fall. So pay close attention to this, because this could affect us as well. Remember what I tell you. Foreign policy should also be domestic policy. We need to pay attention to this as well. This is coming from Frankfurt, Germany, which I'm very familiar with. OPEC and allied oil producing countries, including Russia, made a small trim in their supplies to the global economy Monday, underlining their unhappiness as recession fears help drive down crude prices, along with the cost of gasoline to drivers' delight. The decision for October rolls back a mostly symbolic increase of 100,000 barrels per day in September. It follows a statement last month from Saudi Arabia's energy minister that the OPEC Plus coalition could reduce output at any time. Pay close attention to this. Reduce output at any time. Oil producers such as Saudi Arabia have resisted calls from the U.S. President Joe Biden to pump more oil to lower gasoline prices and the burden on consumers. OPEC has struck with only cautious increase to make up for deep cuts made during the pandemic. I got to be careful with that word, which were finally restored in August. Since then, growing worries about slumping future demand have helped send oil prices down from June peaks of over $120 per barrel, cutting into the windfall for OPEC plus countries. Coffers, but proving a blessing for drivers in the U.S. as pump prices have eased. The supply cut for October is only a small fraction of the 43.8 million barrels per day under OPEC plus production goals, but wrong-footed several analysts' predictions of no change in output. Oil prices jumped after the announcement. And here are some of those numbers. U.S. crude rose 3.3% to $89.79 per barrel, while international benchmark Brent was up 3.7% to $96.50 after the decision. The amount of oil per day may seem negligible, but the message from today's cut is clear. OPEC Plus thinks they've fallen enough. Now, that's coming from a Columbia energy policy expert. His name is Jason. Oil prices have gyrated in recent months. Recession fears have pushed them down, while worries of a loss of Russian oil because of sanctions over its invasion in Ukraine pushed them up. Recently, recession fears have taken the upper hand. Economists in Europe are penciling in a recession at the end of the year due to skyrocketing inflation fed by energy costs. Okay, let's pop out for a second. So in Europe, their economists are already predicting a recession by the end of this year. So hold on to that. It goes on to say, while China's severe restrictions aimed at halting the spread of the pandemic have sapped growth in that major world economy, those falling oil prices have been a boon to the U.S. drivers, sending gasoline prices down to $3.82 per gallon, record record highs of over $5 in June, and offering a potential boost to Biden as his Democratic Party heads into the midterm elections. This comes from the press secretary of the White House, Karine. The president has been clear that energy supply should meet the demand to support economic growth and lower prices for American consumers and consumers around the world. President Biden is determined to continue to take every step necessary to shore up energy supplies and lower energy prices. Now, this is the part I think we need to really pay attention to here. I'm going to highlight it for you. But concerns about the loss of Russian supply are still there because European sanctions aimed at blocking most Russian oil imports won't take effect until the end of the year. So here we go. Other factors are lurking that could influence the price of oil. For one, the group of 7 wealthy democracies plan to impose a price cap on Russian oil. Can't talk tonight. Aimed at battling high energy prices and reducing oil profits that Russia can use for its war in Ukraine. That's if the cap works as intended. Russia could refuse to supply oil to countries and companies observing the cap, which would take barrels off the market. The price cap has not been set, and its influence on the global price remains unclear. So pay attention to that. Meanwhile, a deal between Western countries and Iran to limit Tehran's nuclear program could ease sanctions and see more than 1 million barrels per day of Iranian oil return to the market in the coming months. However, tensions between the U.S. and Iran appear to have risen in recent days. Iran seized 2 U.S. naval drones in the Red Sea and U.S., Kuwait, and Saudi warplanes flew over the Middle East on Sunday in a show of force. OPEC plus countries, energy ministers said their September increase of 100,000 barrels a day was only for that month, and that the group could meet again at any time to address market developments. So that is in reference to the oil situation. And I told you guys last week, I talked to my friend in the UK. They don't know if they're going to be able to have heat this winter. All of this affects so many other countries. It's not just about Russia and Ukraine. It's not just about the surrounding countries. It even can affect countries in the UK, right? Or countries like the UK. Now, over the weekend, Europeans decided they were going to speak up. Listen to this, and I'm going to show you some videos because I want to show you the difference between a protest in Europe and a protest in the United States. Tens of thousands protest in Prague against Czech government, EU, and NATO. Oh, you don't say. September 3rd, an estimated 70,000 people protested in Prague against the Czech government on Saturday, calling on the ruling coalition to do more to control soaring energy prices and voicing opposition to the European Union and NATO. Organizers of the demonstration from a number of far-right and fringe political groups, including the Communist Party. Well, look at that. People from the right and people from the left coming together to protest over an issue? Oh, what do you know? Now, this was said by the European nation should be neutral militarily and ensure direct contracts with gas suppliers, including Russia. Police estimate put the number of protesters at around 70,000 by mid-afternoon. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've been to protests, and I have not been to a protest here that had over 70,000 people. Just saying. Even the George Floyd protests here in Boston didn't have 70,000 people. So keep that in mind. So here we go. The aim of our demonstration is to demand change, mainly in solving the issue of energy prices, especially electricity and gas, which will destroy our economy this autumn. That's coming from Jairi, who is a co-organizer. Notice here, they are telling you what their demand is. This is something we need to do more of here in the US when we do have these protests. What are the demands? What are we asking them to do? What do we want to change? Right? So they're letting you know what the demands are up front. The protests at Wenceslas Square in the city center was held a day after the government survived a no confidence vote amid opposition claims of inaction against inflation and energy prices. Now, this is the difference, ladies and gentlemen. When we were upset about the gas prices here in the United States, what did we do? We complained, right? But what did we do? Did we gather 70,000 people and march and protest against it? This kind of thing happens in Europe multiple times. Like, this is not a one-off. France is notorious for this. And people come out in large numbers. That's the difference between being fed up and angry in Europe versus being fed up and angry in the United States. See how they hit the streets? When I say hit the streets, that's what I'm talking about. I don't mean 15 people. Hit the streets the same way all of you got together and came out for Bernie Sanders rallies. Let's go back in. The vote showed how Europe's energy crisis is fueling political instability as soaring power prices stoke inflation, already at levels unseen in 3 decades. Prime Minister Petra Fiala, who leads the center-right five-party coalition, told CTK News Saturday that the protesters did not have the country's best interest at heart. Interesting, of course, right? The protest on Wenceslas Square was called by forces that are pro-Russian, are close to extreme positions, and are against the interests of the Czech Republic. That sounds familiar, right? Of course, the leader would speak out against it. Don't we have that happen here? So that is a little bit there about the protest that took place in Prague, but I don't want to just tell you about it. I want to show you what it looks like. Look at this. I'm just going to pause it there. Look at all the people. Look at all of these people that came out. Over 70,000 people. This picture right here, it kind of reminds me of the March on Washington in DC. Just the way the crowd is shaped here. It kind of reminds me of that. When is the last time we've had something like that, huh? I think the closest we've come to is the George Floyd protest, right? And then Joe Biden won and people went home because they thought, oh, police brutality is solved now. Look at all those people. That is phenomenal. This is what we need to happen here in the United States. This is what I want to see. That's a good point, Juliet. Juliet said we can only get crowds like that at a football stadium. You know what? I think Juliet's right, and I think that says something about American culture. Where are our priorities? It shows you where our interests lie and what we consider to be more important. A lot of times, pop culture and sports end up being more important to us than fighting for our rights. And I don't think it's necessarily our fault per se. I think that we've been distracted, right? Look at all the ads. Netflix and chill. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. They throw so many things at us to keep us distracted. They want us to be more concerned about which celebrities are fighting against each other instead of paying attention to the fact that we don't have the benefits that we should have in this country. I want to show you another one here. And I want to give a shout out here to Empathy Educates, who goes on to say, where is America's left? Suppressed by Biden's militarism press. It's Prague, Paris, London. Now Cologne has risen. Tens of thousands of people came out to protest against the transfer of weapons to Ukraine and a speedy return to dialogue with Russia. Before I play this clip, I want to ask you, Empathy Educate here has a good question. Where is America's left? Because it's not out in the streets. What should be America's left is what you see happening right now in Prague, in Paris, in London. The protests that you see that have happened in France over the years. We need crowds like this. That's right, Dabby Dabs. The protests that I showed you that were happening in Panama, thousands of people just coming out. The protests that I showed you happen in Sri Lanka. How the people said, the working class and poor people said, we are not going to take this anymore. So when I tell you that we don't have a true left in America, this is exactly what I'm referring to. We really don't have this. We should, We could, but I think people are too distracted. And I think sometimes some of us are a little too comfortable. Now check out this video clip here. So notice something here. Here's the police. Let's go back and catch these guys. Okay, here's the police. They're no match for those people. See what happens when you have more numbers? This is what I was talking about. There's way more of us than there are of them. You see this? What are they going to do? What are they going to do against 70,000 people? Anybody? Somebody. Let me know. I don't know. I don't think anything is going to happen here. And if you notice, they have on protective gear. They have helmets on. They're ready to go, right? Look, they have drums and everything. The people are like, oh no, we are not taking this anymore. This is the kind of thing that I would like to see us do for Medicare for All. When we had those marches for Medicare for All in this country last year, there's a march for Medicare for All this year. Why can't we get those numbers to come out? Why? Those 14 cops might as well join. They are definitely in the same class as the protesters. See, brass. I love that, Seabrass. I love it. I love it. Now, of course, there are other issues too, right? Like their police may not be as militarized. And I get that as well. But I feel like we haven't even really tried. Like it's just really the way people are dying in this country because they don't have health insurance. We should have thousands and thousands of people to come out for that. There's just no excuse, I think. You know, what's that? Kitty Loves Films. We have tried. Yeah, I think we need to try harder. I really do. And Bill Bradley brings up something here because right wingers attended the march, the Medicare for All marches, and leftists lost their mind because they don't actually want populism. It's not a mystery. That's a big part of it, right? You see the problem? I don't know. I don't know where we go from here, except that it gets kind of old. It gets kind of old. JB Fonts in the chat, there's enough subscribers in the top BreadTube host to get thousands of people out in the streets, but many of them don't want to activate their audience to get into the streets. Exactly. Think about it. Think about Well, I think the only person that's done this that has a really, really large audience has been Jimmy Dore. But think about it. Breaking Point says what? Over 800,000 subscribers? What if they told all their subscribers go march for Medicare for all? Think about it. If everyone did that, if Majority Report did that, if Breaking Points did that, along with Jimmy Dore, if TYT did that, think about it. We couldn't even get quote unquote leftists to really force the vote. We couldn't even get people to do that. What is that, Curtis? The better question is why their audience supports them. That's a good point as well. We're going to get into a little bit more about tonight, about where this progressive left is supposed to be heading. We talk about the debate here between Briahna Joy Gray and Krystal Ball, because I think there's some very revealing moments in that interview. She's Black says, I agree, Sabby, Western imperialism should definitely be an economic issue. That's right. Elizabeth, they also don't lose their health care if they don't go to work and instead protest. That's true. That is true, Elizabeth. They do have something to kind of hold over us, huh? Bill Bradley says the article literally said it was the left and right, and now leftists want to claim it. Typical. That's a good point. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. Our left is too busy gouging who's more or truer left amongst each other than coming together as the class-based left. Leadership does matter. That's a good point as well, AJF. There are so many things you can point to. And speaking of things that you can point to, I'm going into this next story here, and I want you just for a second to just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and I want you to remove every thought or belief or idea that you have had about communism. Because we are going to break communism down a little bit. And, shout out to Professor Richard Wolff for doing this. At the very beginning of the video, he mentions that people have been asking him to do this, to discuss it. So he took that leap. And there may be some things that he talks about in reference to communism that may be new to you, or maybe you have not heard this before. And one of the things that he tackles right off the bat is, where exactly did the term communism come from? And I think this is important for people to hear. In this country, we have been taught to see it as such a negative aspect, right? This is not something that should be celebrated. That's what we've been taught. This goes all the way back to McCarthyism, right? But is that necessarily true? Let's go ahead and get into that discussion. Now, this is a part of Richard Wolff's Economic Update. You guys know we do a segment on this once a week. And the title of this video is called, What is Communism? So let's go ahead and get into that.
I'm going to try to give you an overview of what the word, the concept, and the social movement called communism is all about. And it may be different, probably will be, from what you might have thought that word means. So let's begin at the very beginning. What is communism? Mostly, for most of human history that this word and this idea have circulated, I think it's fair to say it has been a utopian dream, an ideal, a notion that the human community, and notice please the same root, commune, community, communism.
Community. And Gene hit the nail on the head, community. Now, why would community be a bad thing? Why would the government want to paint the idea of community as a bad thing? Well, I'm sitting back here and I'm thinking about the way that our government operates. And it's all coming to me. When do they really push for us to establish community? When? Because most of the time, especially during election season, they are actually telling us to be divisive. They're telling us to go against another side. Republicans are telling us to go against the Democrats. Democrats are telling us to go against the Republicans. This is the reason why some people like me are independents. So the idea of community, part of that includes coming together with people. And if you're trying to create community, not everyone in the community is going to have the same political ideology as you. That's why they don't push that. The Black Panthers realize that. The Black Panthers realize that it is in your community where you are going to get that support and help that you need. Whether it's the breakfast program, the lunch program, whether it's free clinics, those were things that were done within the community. It was not done through the federal government because they realized that the federal government was not going to help out the people in the community. And yet, for all these years, they have taught us that this is such a bad word, that we should be afraid of it, that we should be ashamed.
The human community could function in a mutually respectful, mutually honest, mutually nurturant way as an idealized community in which what everybody contributed was what they knew best, loved to do, felt passionate about, and where everyone received from the community, both physical and material, but also spiritual.
Everyone received from the community. This is why I say an organization like the Black Panthers had the right idea. And some people don't realize that the Black Panthers were not just a local group. It wasn't just American chapters. It was an international organization. There were Black Panther organizations in South Korea, you guys. So this was something that was spreading. And the one thing that the government did not want the American people to do was to come together, regardless of political ideologies, regardless of race. They didn't want working class and poor people to come together because then they start to realize, hey, maybe we should be fighting against the 1%. Maybe we should be fighting against the oligarchs. Maybe this idea of going and voting for someone is really not going to help us. So let's just screw all that and let's see what we can get done with each other. They didn't want that. Eric, can you turn this video up just a little bit? Just a teensy bit. Might have to take it back a little bit to do that.
As an idealized community in which what everybody contributed was what they knew best, loved to do, felt passionate about, and where everyone received from the community, both physical and material, but also spiritual benefits, consumables, means of both a physical and mental life. Communism was a generic idea that this sort of community would be valuable in terms of where you live, valuable in terms of where you work, and valuable as a way to link up with other people, no matter what the particular activities you engaged in, which is why communistic communities, in this sense, have long existed for thousands of years.
Notice he said, regardless of the political ideology that you engage in.
I'm going to give you just a few examples. I remember once traveling through France and noticing as I entered a village that it used to be called, and many of them still are called, communes. It's partly a description of their setup as a community, but partly a harking back to a notion of this mutually supportive ideal, this utopian ideal. You might also be struck to learn that in many religions, there are specific rules and commitments to that kind of interaction that you could call communism. People interested in communism have noticed that, for example, medieval Catholic monks orders of nuns, and all kinds of spiritually engaged people organized their communities where they lived and where they worked in this mutually supportive way. Perhaps the most famous document about it is called, fittingly, the Communist Manifesto.
Yep.
Written and published in 1848, that's a little over 150 years ago, by Marx and Engels. It talked a lot about what was wrong with society at that time, which they identified with capitalism, and what it was that they, as critics of capitalism, pointed to as an alternative that others who are either critics or victims of capitalism would be well advised to think about and to pursue.
And this is something I want to say here for a second. When you start critiquing capitalism, people see you as a threat. Let's think about it, right? Because if you're thinking about the oligarchs, you're thinking about the billionaires, they love capitalism. They don't want to embrace socialism or Marxism or communism. They don't want to embrace any of that. They love capitalism because it gives them that reign over the free market, and it allows them to earn a lot of money by exploiting the people that work below them. So when you start coming out and saying that capitalism is bad, I'm against capitalism, those people, and I say those people because they're the ones that actually control the government, corporations control the government, those people, it is a red flag for them. So they send these messages to the government and say, you need to go after these individuals. In fact, tomorrow, a big special guest will be on here with me tomorrow night who actually has had that happen recently. They don't want you to educate the masses about how dangerous capitalism really is and how we've been brainwashed and conditioned to think that it's really working for us. Or if we just work hard enough, work a couple more hours each week, pick up another shift here, pick up another shift there, that we will actually get the American dream. And there are people who will spend their whole lives trying to do this. People will be 70 years old, still trying to obtain the American dream, to the point where they won't even retire at 70 years old. And I've seen it. And it should never take that long. It only takes that long because it is not obtainable for everyone. And that's the problem with capitalism. It doesn't benefit everyone. It benefits a certain select few, and the rest of us, a lot of times, are just trying to get by. That's the problem.
Their idea was quite simple, that this is something that has been around and will come back over and over again. Indeed, they opened the Communist Manifesto with that famous line about communism is like a ghost haunting modern society, with the image constantly of how things could be different and how things could be better. And I'm going to end today's program, as I'll show you, by suggesting to you that worker cooperatives in the workplace are an attempt to bring that ghost right back to life right now.
Where is Roger Meadows when you need him? Did you hear what he just said about worker co-ops? And this is something that I've been telling people, look, trying to create a union, that's good. Trying to unionize, that's good. Joining a union, that's good. That's giving you some benefits, some rights, right? But worker co-ops are actually better than unions. And I think we need to start talking more about that and focusing more on that than unionizing. When you join a union, you still don't own any piece of the company that you're working for. Yeah, they'll give you extra benefits here. Maybe part of that union agreement may be that you get a 3 or 4% raise every year regardless, right? That could be part of it. Maybe it means that you're guaranteed vacation that you weren't guaranteed before. That could be part of it. But I want you to understand that's the minimal. Those are things that we should have in this country already anyway. You shouldn't have to fight to have vacation. You shouldn't have to fight to have paid maternity leave. You shouldn't have to fight to have health care. You really, these are basic necessities that we should already have. And we have been convinced in the United States, because this is an individual country. Here, it's all about the individual. It's all about individualism. What can you do for yourself? Not what can you do for your community? So we've been conditioned and programmed since grade school that we're supposed to fight for things if we want more. That these things that I just mentioned to you are not just supposed to be given to us, but they really should just be given to us. So if that's the case, instead of going towards unions, the ultimate dream should be worker cooperatives, because then you own a piece of the company. Professor Wolff talks a lot about worker co-ops on his channel, Democracy at Work. I highly recommend that you follow that channel. We have worker co-ops in this country. They don't get a lot of press. I wonder why. They don't get as much attention as unionizing efforts do, because you get more through a worker co-op. They don't want that to really get out like that. I wish we would focus more on that. I would love to see more co-ops in this country so that you can own a piece of. We don't own anything. You're working for this company. You just created a union. That's good. But they still own you. It's almost like a modern day version of slavery, just with some money. Just a little bit of money added in. So it's something to think about. Are the things that we are fighting for, are these things that are difficult to get, that we should have to strive to get in this country? Or are these policies and benefits that we should already be given from birth? Something to think about.
Okay. Even after the Communist Manifesto in the middle of the 19th century, for the rest of that century, what we had was a slow growth of those ideas, but not mostly under the word communism. That word faded and was replaced by the term socialism. Socialism became the great alternative to capitalism across the second half of the 19th century, around Europe, here in the United States, and pretty much globally as it spread. But it was always the notion of something fundamentally different from capitalism in ways that ought to make it more attractive, at least in the minds of those who were so persuaded. World War I changed everything. Indeed, the 50 years up to and into World War I were years of growing, horrible conflict. Most of that conflict was between European countries and the colonies that they either already had from an earlier time or acquired in the 18th and 19th century. The Russians competed against the British to shape colonies, the French against the Germans, the Belgians against the Americans. There were endless wars, small and large, throughout what we now call Asia, Africa, Latin America, and so on. And then it all came to a head when the final war, World War I, thought to be final at the time, because it was the worst war human society had ever seen, killed 20 million people, half military, half civilian. But it came after colonial wars that killed many millions more, including here in the United States, where the 18th and 19th century were literally continuous warfare between the Europeans who arrived here and the native people who were systematically destroyed. Anything as cataclysmic as a world war, let alone one that comes after wars that killed many millions more, shook everything. Modern society has never overcome the scars of World War I. And one of the things that happened was to shake socialism. It had grown dramatically from the middle of the 19th century up until World War I, but World War I split modern socialism into two groups.
And this is what is happening now. It's starting to come back again, and it's growing again. I did tell you guys this, I think a couple of months ago. The students that I worked with were Gen Z students, and they are more likely to embrace socialism. And you have to ask yourself why. And this is why someone like a Bernie Sanders, even though he calls himself a democratic socialist, whatever, even someone like him, this is why the establishment saw him as such a dangerous option, right? Because he was reaching a lot of people, and especially a lot of younger people who were kind of waking up to this, like, hey, maybe we should have all these things that he says that we should have. Now, I have other criticisms of Bernie Sanders. I'm going to get into that in a minute with the next story. But it started to spread. That message started to spread. So more people starting to ask, maybe we should have these things. Why do we not have them? Yes, the US government does give more money to the military industrial complex. Why are they not giving that money more to us, to the American people? If they took the military budget and they cut that military budget, maybe we could have health care for everyone in this country. So yes, it is happening again. And this is what they fear. This is why they're trying to silence voices like that. Pay close attention. It's coming again. It's coming around again, right? And this is coming to the younger people who pretty much they're going to be they're going to be the ones who are going to be in power in the next 15, 20 years, right? Politically, they're the ones. So they see that as a big threat. And I think just pay attention. Just pay attention to what's happening. There's a reason why they're trying to silence certain people.
One group ended up keeping the name. We are critics of capitalism. We want to do better. And we call ourselves socialists. But another group was critical of this first group. And they said, you're not doing enough. You're not going far enough. You haven't come up with a really worked out answer. We're determined to go further. And we're going to call ourselves something else.
Here we go.
We're going to call ourselves communists. That's when the term takes on a whole new meaning. Because what happened in almost all of the countries where there was a socialist party was that party split into a socialist party and into a new communist party. And all the socialists had to pick sides. Which way you're going to go, with the socialists or with the communists? One of the key issues, not the only one, but one of the key issues had to do with World War I. The socialists were those who decided they had to go with their own country. They had to go to war, World War I, fight the war as German socialists or British socialists or American socialists. And that would put them against, of course, socialists in other countries who were soldiers or affected civilians. But others said, no, this is not a war that we as socialists should fight.
What?
Because it's a war that's the product of capitalism. It's a war among countries dominated by capitalists. It's the fruit of their endless quest to make money by controlling all the rest of the planet in the cold.
It is a war dominated by capitalism. And we see this happening today with all of them. What is it over? Oil, right? Usually it's over oil.
Colonial territories they warred over for much of the 19th century. We don't want to be part of it. And the interesting thing was those who refused to be partisan in the war included both the head of the Socialist Party in the United States, Eugene Victor Debs, and the head of the equivalent party in Russia, Lenin. Both of them said, this is not our war. We are not going to fight in it, and urged Russians not to take up arms against working class people in other countries.
That is important for you to know. This is why I like for you to hear a little bit of history, because given that context that he just gave you about what they decided to do in Russia, how they said, we're not going to participate, we're not going to go to war against working class people. Does that help you understand why governments like the US government over the past couple of decades have demonized Russia? Let's hear that from Professor Wolff again. Everyone, take note to this. I should timestamp this, huh? Let's see when this starts.
As German socialists or British socialists or American socialists. And that would put them against, of course, socialists in other countries who were soldiers or affected civilians. But others said, no, this is not a war.
Timestamp 9:58 if you want to refer back to this, if you watch the entire video from Richard Wolff.
That we as socialists should fight, because it's a war that's the product of capitalism. It's a war among countries dominated by capitalists. It's the fruit of their endless quest to make money by controlling all the rest of the planet in the colonial territories they warred over for much of the 19th century. We don't want to be part of it. And the interesting thing was those who refused to be partisan in the war included both the head of the Socialist Party in the United States, Eugene Victor Debs, and the head of the equivalent party in Russia, Lenin. Both of them said, this is not our war, we are not going to fight in it, and urged Russians not to take up arms against working class people in other countries.
Not to take up arms against working class people in other countries. Well, well, well. That says a lot.
As Mr. Debs did. Lenin was exiled, Debs was jailed for taking such a position. But
see what they did? What did they do? They exiled one, they jailed the other. See? Again, what was addressed? Working class people.
it began to make very clear what some of the differences were between socialists and communists. Then there was the revolution in Russia, where, under the leadership of the same Lenin,
we have 716 people watching. Let's go ahead and hit that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. Sorry, I'm trying to channel my inner CJ here and remember to do that.
For the first time, socialists came to power. And the question was, what were they? Which kind of socialists? But Lenin, by having taken his position against the war, could not and would not go back to the old socialism, so they became the Communist Party.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit of history lesson for you. And they're still trying to silence anti-war voices today. I'm not going to play the entire video. I think you should definitely go watch the entire video. Again, the name of this video is called, it's Richard Wolff's Economic Update. It's on Democracy at Work. And the title is called, What is Communism? Again, pass this on to your friends, family members, encourage them to watch the full video. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, huh? It's good to know about history. It's good to know about history because sometimes it can help explain why people have the views that they have today and why the government operates the way that it does today. So I thought that that was important for people to hear. I know some of you watching are probably like, oh God, no, not the communists, not the C word. But just because you may be against something or opposed to something doesn't mean that we can't at least talk about it, right? And I think it was important for people to hear that. Professor Wolff always coming through. Very, very valuable history lesson. Does that change your opinion? If you were against it, does that change your opinion a little bit or your perception a little bit about communism. I'll go ahead and take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Bryce said, I'm with Wolff on this. All right. Okay, thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Where's the left? Hopefully collecting signatures to get ballot initiatives on the ballot. However, they are also fighting you guys. Michigan fighting hard today at getting early voting, abortion kicked off the ballot. Also, what are the police going to do? Hopefully join the protest like the armed soldiers did in the Russian Revolution. And thank you for this tip as well. Sabrina, I saw this and considered this to be Wolff's part 2 to his video titled, The American Purge. He did December 10, 2018. He gives a more detailed history of how American socialists, American communists, and unionists pushed FDR to do the New Deal. Ooh, okay, I have to check that out, Roger. Then spoke on the systematic takedown of them after FDR died, showing what happened when they didn't socialize the workplace, leaving the corporate business model in place. Oh, yes, I'm definitely going to check that out. Thank you for this tip as well. Pittsburgh Steelers, the Green Bay Packers are consumer co-ops. The fans own the teams. We need state agencies that provide a pathway to push for startup co-ops and help in the conversation process of transferring ownership of a company to their workers, providing counseling, tax resources, a voice in government and contracting, consultation, education, training, financing, and R&D. And thank you for this one as well. Right of first refusal laws mandating corporations make an offer to their workers to purchase the company once they grow beyond a certain threshold, before they outsource out of the state, automate, sell, or merge with another company, file for bankruptcy, go public, or even after they have gone public to purchase the company and restructure it into a worker co-op. Thank you so much for that, Roger. Wow. So much learned tonight. Colin says, Kwame Ture, it's easy to people to be against something. It's a lot hard to people to be for something. I like that quote, right? Because it was easy for us to be against Trump, but more difficult for us to be for like a Joe Biden, right? Like most of us were not for Joe Biden. Monique says Dr. Wolff is absolutely right to use the short description of communism from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. I feel origin of socialism is like social, society, similar path. I think of the notion of community, communism. Thank you for the super sticker, JM. Bart says they want us atomized by individualism. Oh, excuse me. They want us atomized by individualism, divide and conquer. Thank you for the super chat, Steve. From each according to their abilities to each according to their needs. Oh, you guys are on it tonight. I like it. Credit is born. Marx isn't taught in U.S. university economic departments. He's been banished to the philosophy department. Why you'll only see liberals push cultural Marxism, not economic Marxism. Oh, credit is born. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. We need to give independent press. We need to give independent press time online for American co-ops familiarization leads to recognition, in turn, consideration to greater adoption of it. Well said. And thank you for the super sticker, Aberdeen71. And shout out to my comrade JB at RBN. Professor Wolff is always a win. Right on, right on. And thank you for this tip as well, Roger. If they've shown to have a record of egregious and abusive behavior at putting the public trust, the environment, workers, and consumers at risk, pass state law that gives your governor the power to stationalize the company to one day transfer ownership to their workers by floating a low interest rate loan to their workers to own it once they pay it off. I direct message you that Wolff joint. Oh, I'll direct message you that Wolff joint. Okay, I'll check my DMs again. I told you guys I'm horrible with DMs, so it's hard for me to keep track there sometimes. Shout out to Eric Weaver, who just became a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. All right. We're getting into our next story, and there's so much to be said here. Let's talk about this discussion that happened with Briahna Joy Gray and Krystal Ball. So, this was quite a revealing moment for Krystal Ball, I would say. We did talk about this over at RBN earlier today. I do want to break this down a bit because I feel like this is exactly what I was trying to tell you guys about reformist. They're only willing to go so far. So the name of this video is, Will a Progressive Challenge Biden in 2024? And they get into the conversation of third parties, who would be best to challenge Joe Biden. And there are a couple of things that are said here, I think, on Krystal Ball's part, that I think is incredibly revealing. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to start at this point here, 3 minutes and 5 seconds.
Joe Biden. And my concern is that given all of the fractures that we've seen on the left since Bernie dropped out in 2020, whether it's about force to vote or any of these force to vote adjacent skirmishes that have happened since then, that there is not a guarantee that any candidate, even if they're running against Joe Biden, who's obviously to the right of anybody a progressive would even consider voting for, any progressive that announced at this point would not have the guarantee of full-throated support from the left the way that Bernie did in 2016 and 2020.
Let's talk about that. This piece, I think, is incredibly important, especially if you do want to still do the inside strategy in reference to the president election. It is going to be very difficult for someone coming after Bernie Sanders to get that same amount of support. I'm talking like I went to Bernie's rally here in Boston. There were over 10,000 people there. Okay. It is going to be very difficult. Bernie Sanders, even though he was running a grassroots campaign, he had the most money. He had the most individual donor amounts. I donated a lot of money to Bernie Sanders. You guys have heard me talk about this before, often on this show. And I said, Bernie owes me a refund and owes you one too. But when I think about another candidate trying to fill that slot, are they going to be able to get that same type of energy and that same type of, just the enthusiasm that Bernie supporters had in 2016 and 2020? I can't see, and they're going to mention this in a second, I cannot see a Marianne Williamson getting that type of energy. I can't see Marianne Williamson getting people that enthused the way that Bernie Sanders did. And this is not a dig at Marianne Williamson. She's been on this show multiple times. I think that there are certain issues that Marianne is really good on, but I also think there's some issues that Marianne is not too great on. And those are concerning if you are going to be president of the United States. So I think whoever comes after Bernie Sanders is going to have a bigger challenge, because even though Bernie may have opened the door, right? The problem that they're going to face is that the fact that Bernie opened the door, but he didn't deliver in the end. In the end, Bernie Sanders left his movement and said, vote for Joe Biden. And the squad members followed along with him. In the end, the squad members, they did not come through. They didn't force the vote. So the problem is the examples that have come before them. So anyone coming after Bernie is going to have a more difficult time, not to mention the DNC. They have learned how to adjust their strategy now. So for the next progressive running for president, they're going to be ready for it. More ready than they were when Bernie Sanders ran. So they will have more of a difficult time. But I think the point that Bree mentions here is incredibly important. How do you get that energy again? How? You tell people you're leading a revolution, a movement across the country, and then you bail? How do you get that again? Imagine if MLK said, all right, look, they've been sicking dogs on us. They've beaten us. They've thrown us into jail. That's it. We're not going to try to do this anymore. Imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. said that. Imagine. Some people like me, we'd still be sitting at the back of the bus. I bet you. I bet. So let's go back in.
And I look at someone like Marianne and I see how the alliances that have happened would pick at various aspects of her foreign policy stance, would have issues with some of the, statements she's made about various public officials that have died, a certain approach to certain kind of Silicon Valley types that, she might have a personal little knowledge or relationship with. And there are some people who say, well, don't make the perfect be the enemy of the good. She's obviously so superior to Joe Biden that I can overlook any number of things. And there's other people who have been burned so badly who look to someone like Nina Turner and think, well, she tried twice her way. She didn't learn her lesson about how to break free of the Democratic Party. They feel that she bent her knee on certain policy issues and certain messaging issues that speak to how she would also legislate if she were to win, and therefore are more distrustful than they would have been immediately in the wake of Bernie Sanders. And I wonder, do you think that is something that is surmountable?
So I think it is a real risk. I mean, with regard to Nina, just because I love her, I have to stand up for her and say, I think the idea, which has been floated, that like if she ran third party, she would have had a better chance in this district, is ludicrous.
Let's pause this for a second. I want you to pay attention to something that Krystal just said right off the bat. This is the problem.
I think it is a real risk. I mean, with regard to Nina, just because I love her, I have to stand up for her and say,
because I love her, I have to stand up for her. This is why you can't be friends with you can't be friends with them. You can't be friends. You see the problem? You're afraid to criticize them in the way that you should, in the way that they should be criticized, because that's your friend and you don't want to hurt your friend's feelings and you still want to have access to your friend. It's easier for me because I'm not friends with them. I'm not friends with Nina Turner. I'm not friends with Bernie Sanders. I'm not friends with Marianne's been on the show, but we're not friends. You see the difference? Let's let Krystal go on.
I think the idea, which has been floated, that like if she ran third party, she would have had a better chance in this district, is ludicrous. I mean, this was a district that likes Democrats. And actually the biggest problem for her, especially in her first run when she came a lot closer, was her like voting for Joe Biden is like eating half a bowl of shit. Like that was a real issue for her in that primary. So I think Nina is as like true and sound and solid a warrior as it possibly gets.
But warriors, I think we're going a bit far here to say that Nina Turner is a warrior, because a warrior wouldn't have felt that they needed to let me go ahead and pivot closer to the moderate lane because that's how the district is. A warrior would have just said what they were going to say regardless. She pivoted closer to the moderate lane and she still lost. So what does that tell you? And I've seen this happen multiple times before where these progressive, quote unquote, progressive leftist candidates feel that they need to move closer to the center in order to win. And I've seen that happen multiple times and they continue to lose. So I don't know why this strategy is still being used. So I would not call her a warrior. I'm sorry. No, let's not go that route. This is why you can't be friends with the politicians. This is important for people to know.
That out there is
Krystal, the issue wasn't, I mean, some people obviously would have liked her to run third party, but I think more of the issue is whether or not she should have leaned more into that messaging and not tried to say, campaign with Bakari Sellers or these people who have been open and hostile enemies of the left. And what the approach should have been to some of the anti-Semitic.
I would I would love it to be a world where in every district, like leaning into the lefty anti-establishment position was the winning position. I just don't think that that was that district. I mean, this was a district that loved Hillary Clinton and liked Joe Biden, especially at that point in his presidency. So I just don't.
So Krystal Ball believes that these progressive candidates should have to change who they are in order to win people in their district. This is a big problem with the progressive movement. It's not even as fiery as it was before. It's been watered down. She said nothing in reference to Nina Turner wanting to work with Bakari Sellers. Bakari Sellers, let's remember, he heavily criticized Bernie Sanders' campaigns. Why in the world, and I called this out during her first campaign, why in the world would Nina Turner decide to go work with him, who was sitting up there criticizing against the same politician that she was trying to get elected as president in this country? But see, Krystal Ball is letting you know right now, that's okay. See, she's willing to give that a pass. How far do we go as leftists, as progressives, as Marxists, as socialists? How far do we go to the point that we are okay with accepting the establishment just so we can possibly win? Where's the morality? Where does the fine line? So this was very key to me, because what this told me is that Krystal was okay with them doing whatever they needed to do to win, and Nina still lost.
I just don't buy into that political analysis in that district. But I don't want to get sidetracked with that, because the broader question is will it be harder to consolidate the left this time around? Yes, I think it will be. On the other hand, look at how when Joe Biden did like the bare minimum on student loan debt, there are a lot of people who are so excited. You know, like Dark Brandon memes and the whole bit. It was like, oh my God, like they were just looking for someone to actually do something. The JB Pritzker fanfic is a good example of this as well, because it was like, he hasn't done anything all that crazy amazing as governor of Illinois, but he just like ran on a few good things and then actually delivered on it. And the bar is so low that people are like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I have faith that if you did have a Marianne or someone else who was sort of broadly acceptable to the left, albeit with some, disagreements here or there, that you could see a similar galvanizing, like rallying around this person as a clear alternative to the Democratic establishment. And
I disagree. There's 2 points here I want to capture here. One thing that Krystal Ball says is that there are all these people excited. Oh, what people? Who are the people that were excited? Because I sure as hell wasn't one of them. I told you guys that $10,000, $20,000, that does really nothing for me. For a lot of us that went to grad school, then who are the people she's talking about? This is and CJ frames this so well. This is the problem with the PMCs, with the professional managerial class. I would really like to see them get out of their class bubble and actually talk to people who are working class and poor. And don't come back and tell me they talk to labor unionizers. I'm not talking about people trying to start a union. I'm not talking about people who joined a union. I'm talking about people like Krystal Ball having that conversation with working class people and poor people, not because of what they're trying to do on the labor front, but just to get a sense of what they need in their community. This is important. It's not done. And I think that's why she has the views and the beliefs that she's had. Who is she talking to? Seriously. I don't know, man. The left is in trouble. If this is the ideology, the left has some problems.
I just also want to say regarding the Forward Party, I don't think that this is like a serious threat from a left perspective, just based on, and I say this with respect as someone who's known Andrew even from before he ran for president and consider him a friend and all of those things, but clearly aligned with these very like corporate friendly types. He's taking corporate money. They don't
A lot of people are aligned with corporate friendly types. Krystal is aligned with corporate friendly types. What does Forward Party have to do with the question at hand, which is being asked, which is someone coming to take that Bernie Sanders mantle and run for president? And if so, who is that person going to be? And will they have a real shot? That's what the conversation is about. Forward Party has already explained multiple times, and I've had people come on the show and discuss Forward Party. They've explained multiple times that with their party in particular, it operates more like a caucus than it does a political party. That's why someone who's Republican, Democrat, or independent can run and say they're part of the Forward Party. But the number one idea that they are focusing on right now is ranked choice voting. That's a little bit of a different situation. Bree is particularly talking to her about the progressives, the people coming to take on Bernie Sanders, that Bernie Sanders lane. And I feel like Krystal is she's kind of shifting here as to point out, let me point out all these other, parties or movements that I know are not going to work, because I feel like she can't really answer this question. If Krystal Ball seriously believes that Marianne Williamson is going to be that challenge, is going to be that person to take on that Bernie Sanders mantle and really resonate with working class people, she is sadly mistaken. Marianne Williamson is not working class. I'm sorry. I'll say it again. Again, she's been on this show multiple times. But why does Krystal believe that someone who is a millionaire, someone who is friends with Oprah Winfrey, is going to be able to resonate to working class and poor people in this country? If you want to do that strategy and you want to appeal to that group, why isn't Krystal trying to push someone who is part of the working class, or who comes from the working class, who knows what it's like to struggle? Instead, Krystal's trying to push her friend, which I do want to point out. Where was this energy? Where was this enthusiasm about Marianne Williamson when she ran for president in 2020? Where was it? Somebody tell me. Because if I remember correctly, I remember people like Krystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski saying that they thought Marianne Williamson was a little cuckoo. That's what I remember. So why is it now all of a sudden, yay, she's the perfect prime candidate? Where did this come from? Sabby doesn't forget these things.
Have a platform, stand for any issues outside of ranked choice voting, which I very much support, and I hope that they get that done. But as a real sort of like potential place where lefty voters would go, I just don't see that as being likely.
Well, I mean, so there's a couple of things there. One is that what I've heard from people when asked about folks like, let's say, Senator Turner, and I do think that that example is instructive because it taught people a lesson about the Democratic Party more than it taught people a lesson about Senator Turner. I don't think it's a lack of confidence in her as a person as much as it is in the possibility of being successful as a leftist in that space. And so people will say things like, if I lived in Cleveland, I would have voted for her. If someone like her, Marianne, were to run on a national level, I would vote for them. However, I would not devote the same personal resources, time, energy, and money into the race as I did with Bernie Sanders, because I'm not sufficiently confident that the Democratic Party wouldn't invest more resources, which it obviously has more of, in defeating them.
And not to mention, and I'm one of those people that donated a lot of money, and not to mention, I'm not confident in the fact that even if they were to win, they would do what they said they were going to do. We've seen those disappointments with the squad. We've seen those disappointments with even Bernie Sanders sitting up here making all these excuses for Joe Biden and applauding him and saying us, even when he was polling very low, telling people that Joe Biden's doing a good job. I mean, when it comes to the resources, when it comes to donations, and let's be real, as a candidate, you do need the money, right? You need the donations. You're not convincing me to donate money to another progressive again. I'm not donating money to any politicians again. Never. I can't do it, because look at the disappointment that's come from it. All the people that I saw give their last $5, their last $10 to Bernie Sanders because they believed that he was actually going to fight for working class people. Those people aren't just disappointed disappointed with Bernie Sanders, those people were also broke. And they gave their last to him. So I'm not going back to those people again and telling them, oh, yes, you should vote for this progressive running for president because this time we have a better chance of winning. I'm not going to go ask those people for money again. And neither should you. That is a shame, an absolute shame. And again, I don't know, maybe this is a class issue. Some of us can afford to lose a couple of bucks and some people cannot. But if you can't get the money, if you can't get it on the grassroots level, then you're going to have to take it from corporations, but you're not supposed to do that if you're progressive, right? So this is a big concern. And I think that Bree has a good point here to bring this up because I told you guys, they're not getting any more money from me.
Since we do have this working class movement and somebody's $27 is a much harder hit than AIPAC's 2.7 million. That's the calculation people are doing. And they want some proof that either something different is going to happen this time. And now we've got all of these cases of people trying to run inside and it not working. Or alternatively, that someone is going to show the chutzpah to run outside of the context of the Democratic Party, which might be, it's going to be certainly even a harder, heavier lift, but demonstrates the kind of bravery that would make people invest even if they don't have a lot to give.
So I don't have any hostility to third parties. I just think as long as we have, the political system that we do, it is much more likely, as much as I acknowledge all the obstacles within the Democratic Party, to find success there than it is to find success starting from scratch as a third party candidate. I mean,
okay. And this hits the nail on the head because this is Krystal Ball right here letting you know that she is not willing to try the difficult option or the more difficult option. And I pointed this out on Twitter. This is Krystal Ball admitting to you, this is a mask off moment, that she is not willing to try the more difficult option. This is the part I was telling you about the reformists. They are only willing to go so far. That's not someone I want on my team. When I tell you that we need to do mutual aid, we need to do more direct action. When I tell you I just got back from Camp Dot, I learned a lot from activists across this country that we need to work with people in our communities and see what the needs are of people in the community and help each other. That's where my focus is, top of the list. This whole thing of, oh, who's going to run for president and we should support this No, that's not the same for me anymore as it was before. And it's because of people like Bernie Sanders. And it's because of people like the Squad and the fact that the Democratic Party is never going to allow them to win. And we need to address that. And we need to talk about that. We need to talk about the fact that here is Krystal telling you she's still willing to go through the same system of putting progressive through the Democratic Party, at least especially for the presidency, knowing that the DNC is going to make it so that they do not win, whether they do it by smear campaigns through the mainstream media, whether they do it by a phone call from Barack Obama, and telling candidates to drop out, or whether they just change the rules middle of the Democratic primary debates, little things like that. So knowing that they're doing all of those things, you mean to tell me you still want to try to do that strategy, knowing the game is rigged against you? It's against you. At least if I vote third party, at least if I vote independent, do you think my hopes are up high that yes, they're definitely going to win? If you do, then you don't understand the strategy. The strategy is not necessarily for them to win. The strategy is to take votes away from people like Joe Biden, to take votes away from the Democratic Party. That is the strategy. To shake this system up and wake people up. This is why it would have been great if Jesse Ventura had ran in 2020. Shake the fuck out of them. This is why they were afraid of someone like Jill Stein. They were more afraid of Jill Stein than they were of Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders was still running through the Democratic Party and they knew at the end of the day he would play ball. So what does that tell you about the system? If you say that third parties are not considered a viable option, okay. What does that tell you about the system that we have in the country? What does that tell you? And you still want to play this game?
We have first past the post voting. It basically forces us into this two-party system. And that's the reality we face today. So as much as there were a million obstacles in Bernie's way, he still came a hell of a lot closer than even the best third-party candidates have, in our modern political system. So
what do you mean he came a hell of a lot closer? He lost twice in a row, Krystal. Bernie should have won. I don't accept this talking point that Bernie became close. He was close. No, I don't accept that. Because when I talk to people about who they were going to vote for, and I talk to people about the issues, when I look at the exit polls, that tells me that Bernie Sanders should have won. So it's not good enough for me that he came close. Now, why didn't he win? Because the Democratic Party, the party he was running through, went against him. So why are you still trying to be part of a party that don't want you, boo? I don't get it. You guys need to understand this. I want to say this again very clearly. It is not enough that Bernie came close. Bernie Sanders should have won. That is the problem.
that's number one. Number two is, I think there is something hopeful to point to right now. And in the student loan debt relief, the other part of this that's very encouraging is this was an idea that was really born of Occupy Wall Street, right? So starts with Occupy, starts with the left, it gets picked up by the Sanders campaign, gets pushed in 2016, gets pushed in 2020.
By Jill Stein.
And I have to pause it here for a second because I can't show John Oliver, but Bree is correct there. For people who may not remember, it was actually Jill Stein. And Krystal mentions Occupy Wall Street and how that moved into the Bernie Sanders campaign. I've been seeing this happen for a while, where the Democratic Party will take ideas and issues from third parties, particularly the Green Party, and they'll water it down. And I'll give you another example. The Green New Deal. For those who are not aware, the Green New Deal came from the Green Party. The Democratic Party, the progressives in the Democratic Party, people like AOC and Ed Markey, they took that idea, watered it down, and decided to make it a Democrat Party policy. Don't believe me? Look it up. Because a lot of people I've talked to don't realize that. That was a Green Party platform. They took it, watered it down. Occupy movement was amazing until it went into a freaking presidential campaign in the Democratic Party. And it was watered down. And this is what happens, and I've seen it time and time again, when the Democratic Party, they take these issues, they take these policies, they get a hold of it, and they water it down. They co-opt it. They're doing the same thing with the term progressive.
Saw fit to do for Wall Street not that long ago. It was about $4 trillion in free money in the form of so-called quantitative easing, which is a magic trick that basically people don't need to understand any more about than that it is a magic trick.
No. Again, got to skip past John. I can't play him. Sorry. It's not a me thing. It's a YouTube thing.
So absolutely. So, you have this idea that comes really out of the left, is adopted by Bernie Sanders running in the Democratic primary. Joe Biden is forced. He doesn't want to take this position. He's forced into taking this position in the Democratic primary, but he says it really clearly. And then he's completely reluctant to do it as president. But again, because he had made that promise so clearly, and because there was a very clear electoral ramification staring them in the face for not delivering, he's again forced into actually making good on that. So I just offer.
He was forced because of the progressive. No, Joe Biden implemented that and it was weak as fuck. he implemented that student loan cancellation of 10K to 20K, not because he was forced by the progressives, but because his poll numbers were so damn low. Democrats were on track to lose the midterms. That's why he did it. Let's be real. Let's call it all out. Let's call it all out here.
That is a hopeful example that it's not all impossible. Like, yes, we recognize this is insufficient and that there's a lot more to do. But in some ways, the fact that Joe Biden is like such an enemy of these ideas and over the 50 years of his career has been on the complete wrong side of all of them. But still, by the pressure of like the left movements over time and the Sanders campaign really popularizing this idea in the Democratic primary, this is forced upon even one of like the the villains in the Democratic Party. So
she really believes he was forced to do this. Like she really I don't buy it. I really don't buy that she is this naive. I really don't.
To me, that's a very hopeful thing. And I just don't see, as I'm a huge supporter of the labor movement. I think it makes a lot of sense to invest a lot of time, energy, effort, everything we can into that. But you have to have both. You have to have electoral strategy. You have to have the, labor organizing that helps create sort of grassroots democracy, and the two things then build and feed on each other.
There's something I got to add about the you have to have both part. And I mentioned this on RBN as well. She mentions the inside strategy through the Democratic Party and labor organizing. Particularly, I believe she's talking about the unions because she talks about that a lot. And I have to say this again, because I may have new viewers this time around than we were on RBN. And I have to say, when you talk about the labor organizers, there is a particular group that is left out of that. And that's people who cannot work. That's people who are disabled, people who receive disability payments. My mom is disabled. My mom cannot work. So my mom receives a disability check. And so she applauds like all the labor unionizing. She's like, yeah, they're fighting the good fight, but that don't really help my mom. You see what I'm saying? That don't really help her. She doesn't get to benefit from that. When it comes to electoral politics, this inside strategy, that hasn't helped my mom either. And I think I don't want us to forget about these groups. We need to stop forgetting about people who are poor. We need to stop forgetting about the disabled community in this country, which a lot of times I feel are the most forgotten. They are excluded from multiple things. I just saw a post from Savage Joy earlier where she was going to a concert at Madison Square Garden and there was no, disability access, and that she had to walk up the stairs with her cane. It's things like that that people just don't think about, right? So you can't forget about those groups. So how are we going to help those people in particular? Because it's not happening through electoral politics. And I also don't see that happening through labor organizing through unions either. We need to talk about that.
So I think another way to characterize your framing just there, which I think is accurate about what caused Biden to eventually bend the knee. And I do just also want to be clear that he still has not fulfilled the totality of his campaign promise. He promised to cancel all student loan debt for graduates of HBCUs and public universities making under $125,000.
That's right.
Per year. And a lot of HBCU graduates and an enormous number of public university graduates haven't forgotten that particular promise. But the reason why he was under pressure is because there were grassroots leaders who did all the door knocking, who won Georgia, who are disproportionately Black females burdened by student debt, who have been telling the administration that there are real electoral consequences at stake here. And I would argue that if it is the fear that you might lose, if it is the fear that midterms are going to be an even bigger bloodbath, if it's electoral consequences that are ultimately moving Biden's hand, it's not clear to me that it makes sense to say that a third party candidate with the power to, yes, have the spoiler effect isn't exactly what's necessary to get the best outcome, especially when you're talking about you're weighing the pressure of a third party campaign and getting Biden to come to the table and do what he needs to do against an insider run for presidency, which I would love to be effective, but we've now seen Bernie Sanders, a
preternaturally capable candidate, better positioned than almost anyone I can imagine. Certainly anybody else that I could be thinking of right now in this historical moment, still trying, beating out everybody in fundraising and losing. And I really take the point that there is a certain impossibility to the idea of running as an outsider.
I just want to add something here to the part where Bree says taking all that money from people and losing. Bernie Sanders received what I think last time I checked was over $100 million from us, and he lost. Imagine if we put that money into mutual aid organizations instead. We could have helped people immediately in this country instead of putting it through an electoral campaign and hoping that that person wins and then hoping that they'll do the right thing. All that money gone, wasted. What did it go to? Where did it end up? Let's ask Bernie. Why do I have establishment Democrats sending me emails and texting me, people that I never supported, people that I never donated to? Did Bernie give them his list? I wonder.
But only if you think of the only gain being getting into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. If you think leverage.
But let me say though, even on this student, just if we focus on student debt, why did Biden take that position in the primary? It's because he was going to lose the primary if he didn't. I mean, that's where the pressure came from that forced him into that position, is the fact that you have Bernie Sanders having run in 2016 and Bernie Sanders having run in 2020.
And he still lied about it, Krystal. He still didn't do what he said he was going to do when it came to student loan debt. He still lied about that. Let's be real here, guys. And I showed this on my show last week. I went back to the website. He promised to cancel all of it for people making under $125,000. So he still didn't do what he said he was going to do.
And in the Democratic primary, forcing this issue on the table and forcing him to take a position that he doesn't want to take. So even in that example of the student loan debt relief, it mattered to be on that stage, pressuring him directly. Joe Biden didn't care what Jill Stein or, the Green Party was saying. He was forced into that position because of what was happening in the Democratic primary.
No, Krystal. And you think that Joe Biden actually cared what Bernie Sanders was saying too? Because Bernie Sanders walked back his own policy, his own issues, and Bernie Sanders caved into what the establishment Democrats wanted. It really hasn't been the other way around. It hasn't been the establishment, the corporate Democrats saying, okay, we're going to bend to what the progressives want. It's been the progressives who have gone to DC that have decided to bend to what the corporate Democrats want. That's why they agreed to give the money to Ukraine. This is why they would not force the vote. This is why anytime they had a chance where their vote actually was some type of leverage and they could actually push back with their vote, they chose not to do it or they voted present. So come on. I don't buy it.
It's an interesting question whether or not Bernie Sanders, had he gone rogue in 2016 or gone rogue in 2020, whether he would have had a greater or lesser effect. And I think that before Bernie lost in 2020, the arguments against third parties and people operating outside of the Democratic Party were a lot stronger. In a world where we had such a capable candidate that still was derailed, all of the kind of like, this is the serious person's way to do it kind of arguments, all of the, you just got to do it within the Democratic Party arguments, they lost a lot of teeth as far as I'm concerned. You have to be able to show, and look, I adore Marianne, but it is going to be, it is almost as difficult to imagine a real victory there in the same way as it is difficult to imagine a victory by any of the third party candidates that I've admired and voted for.
See, I don't agree
or
with
even
that
a Bernie
at all.
2016. Tell me why.
I don't agree with that at all because we have the historical record. Like Bernie came very close twice. We don't have a
Bernie came very close twice and lost, Krystal. Do you guys see? This is the pushback that I have. Why do you keep saying Bernie Sanders came close? Bernie Sanders ran twice in a row. Bernie Sanders should have won in 2016 and Bernie Sanders should have won in 2020. He did not because the game was rigged against him because of the DNC, because of the Democratic Party. Let's be real. It's not like when Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary Clinton, she beat him by a landslide. It was close, right? And some would argue that when it came down to the super delegates, Bernie was not treated fairly. So what are you talking about? Look at the exit polls, Krystal. Look at the polls. Even people who were not Democrats, and I talked to conservatives, even some conservatives agreed on Medicare for all. So no, it's not enough that he came close. He should have won. The game is rigged.
A third party who came very close in modern history. So, I mean, Ross Perot was the best example. And, you know, even since that time, sort of things have changed. And also he was like, you know, fairly like in a lot of ways corporate friendly. As a different situation. But we have the record of Bernie coming quite close. And I'm not interested in like raising an awareness, or I shouldn't say that. I am.
No. Listen to that. This is a little revealing.
Time sort of things have changed. And also he was like, you know, fairly like in a lot of ways corporate friendly. As a different situation. But we have the record of Bernie coming quite close. And I'm not interested in like raising an awareness, or I shouldn't say that. I am interested in the idea of raising awareness around issues.
I think she had it right the first time. Whoops. Okay, Eric, I hear you. I'm wrapping up with this point here.
Interested in actually winning the presidency and the powers that entails, because we do see.
You see, this is her whole goal. This is her goal right here.
Awareness, or I shouldn't say that. I am interested in the idea of raising awareness around issues. I'm more interested in actually winning the presidency and the powers that entails, because we do see that when even a Joe Biden decides he wants to move, there's tremendous powers in that office. We saw that also.
She just let you know her interest is winning the presidency. That's her interest. Now, if that's her interest, why would she be pushing someone like Marianne Williamson? Marianne Williamson is awful on foreign policy. Now, some of you may think, why is that important? Why does that matter? And as I've told you multiple times on this show, international issues, foreign policy should also be domestic policy. We need to pay attention to what is happening abroad, because most of the times we're the cause of the conflict. So if you have a president who is not good on foreign policy issues, who is using talking points where they are coming across like a Zionist, where they are not understanding the conflict that is going on between Israelis and Palestinians, when they are not understanding that it's not about protecting the women and children in reference to Afghanistan, that it was about opium, that it was about resources. When you don't understand that, and when multiple people have tried to chime in and educate you and explain to you why you are incorrect on these issues in particular, and you want to be president, that is incredibly dangerous. Because when it comes to foreign policy, that is one policy that the president can move on their own, and they do not always have to get approval from Congress to do so. I'll give you an example. When you have people like Joe Biden, who's sitting up here and he's attacking people in Somalia, the sanctions on Afghanistan, he does not need approval of Congress to do that. If he wants to do drone strikes and things like, he doesn't need their approval. You see the problem? So when it comes to an issue like foreign policy, you got to be spot on for me. You can't be weak. You can't be milquetoast on that issue. You have to be spot on. You have to understand the conflicts that are going on in that country. And if that means that you need to talk to people who are journalists that have been there, that have reported there, that have investigated these issues, then so be it. But educate yourself. But you can't just use these talking points that say it's for the women and the children, and you have no idea about what the conflict is actually about and what is happening to the people. If it was about the women and the children, we wouldn't kill innocent women and children, God damn it. I'm sorry, but it needs to be called out. So for me, no, it's not enough. It's not okay for you to be a Zionist and you're progressive. That's not enough for me. If you're against the Palestinians, not feeling you. Keeping it real. I don't care if you call yourself progressive, leftist, Marxist, whatever you want to call yourself today. Where you stand on those issues, where you stand on imperialism, where you stand on war, that says a lot for me. And if you can't pass those two tests, you're not getting my support. And you shouldn't give them yours either. I think we need to redefine what it means to be progressive. I think we need to really investigate that and look back on that again. Because I think that that's been lost. And one more point I want to add before I go to the comments. I tell you guys that when it comes to electoral politics, we need to put more focus on the local level because that's where you can implement the most change when it comes to electoral politics. I've seen it happen in Massachusetts. The problem that I think the left is going to run into in reference to the presidency and running a progressive, a lot of the issues that Bernie Sanders has run on has already been implemented on the local level. I'm going to use my state for an example. Massachusetts. There are good things and bad things about Massachusetts. But when I look at some of these progressive issues, Fight for 15, Massachusetts implemented that years ago. Not done on the federal level, but we already have it. We've had it for, this has been years. Legalizing marijuana. Massachusetts implemented that years ago. We have cannabis shops and they continue to multiply across the state and they're bringing in a lot of money. Paid maternity leave, paid family leave. Guess what? Massachusetts implemented that last year. And it's not just us. There's other states who have implemented these policies as well. So here is the concern that I have. And you guys know I'm done with the duopoly, but for those of you who do want to do the inside strategy on the federal level, when we're talking about the presidency, some of these issues that Bernie Sanders was fighting for, because they've already been implemented on the state level, is it going to have as much appeal when someone like Bernie runs for president again in 2024, 2028? We need to ask this question because I'll be honest with you, people here in Massachusetts can easily say, yeah, I mean, the progressive candidate seems like the better option, but to be fair, we already have the Fight for 15. We already have marijuana legalization. We already have paid family leave. I think progressives really need to think about that. And I don't think I've talked about this before because it kind of hit me today. But I mean, of course, I think everyone should have those policies implemented. But at the same time, if you don't care about it like as much as I do, will you necessarily feel that desire and that urge to go support that candidate? You already got yours, and that is an American mindset. Is it going to have as much weight come 2024 and 2028 when you already have states implementing it? Something to think about. Eric, I'll take those comments on Rockfin. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. When it comes to Dems president primaries, they have forgotten one word: super delegates that come out due to McGovern. Wasserman Schultz said under oath, they don't have to choose who the owners want. We choose who we want. Williamson only endearing quality is that she was one of two who said she supports reparations. Not even Bernie supported that. Yet Black people voted for Joe because of Obama and Clyburn. Huh? That's right. And thanks for this tip as well. I DM'd you, Professor Wolff joint. Also, I don't know, Sab. I got to go with what Jill Stein said. Although I'm sure third pull voters away from DNR to some extent, but I think by much a larger margin instead increase voter turnout. mostly due to the fact that these are people who normally don't vote. So if we got rid of parties and just have general elections, no primaries, I think that'd bring max turnout. Interesting. And thanks for this tip as well. Congressman Zeldin on one poll is within 4-point shot of beating Governor Hochul. Why is that? Well, I will tell you, she didn't pass New York Health Act, New York Public Build Renewables Act, good cause eviction, outlaw private equity from owning homes, residential apartments, nursing homes, hospitals, etc., running on a robust worker-friendly platform of minimum wage worker co-ops. She fired nurses for being jab hesitant. Now we are short of healthcare workers, and she is saying we have to rebuild our healthcare workforce. She is an arsonist who started a fire and says, wow, look at this fire. We have to pull it out. Speaking of Massachusetts, 1534 Tremont Street, bet the first to implement state version of Medicare for all. Yes, Sab, the state by state strategy. Thank you so much for that, Roger Meadows. I'm going to get to these super chats here in just a second, but I do want to show you this really quick. Eric, do we have that poll? Whenever you're ready, let me know. And then in the meantime, I'll go ahead and make this announcement. I do have a special guest coming on tomorrow night from the African People's Socialist Party. Uhuru, they were the group that was raided by the FBI recently. The chairman will be on, but I do want to let you know, for those who are not aware, this is the organization, and there's some fiery language here just to let you know what you're preparing yourself for tomorrow night. Now, this is Uhuru leader from St. Petersburg, USA. This is Iratha. Listen to what she said after the raid. Oh, I hate when Twitter does this. Exit full screen. Let me play it here. Let me refresh it. How do I refresh this thing on Type VNC? I don't know. Oh, here we go. I don't know if that did it or not. Give me a second, guys. Okay. Listen to this. She's fiery.
We're not concerned at all that
the U.S. is working with every colonial government in the world, and nobody is saying a damn thing about what the U.S. is doing in Africa. What they don't raid the homes and ask white people any questions after they come back from Israel, where they're murdering Palestinian people every single day. They don't flash bomb their homes. They don't send the police there, even though they went into international waters in a place where they are killing Palestinians on a daily basis. Nobody is asking them any questions about their affiliation. The U.S. is affiliated with all the undemocratic forces around the world attempting to oppress African and other colonized people.
Why not register? If you are working with the Russian government, do you not?
Okay, so that is the organization. Chairman Amali will be here tomorrow night. We're going to talk about that. I'm really looking forward to this, guys, because it's been I've been trying to get this interview together, and definitely want to hear from them and get some advice from them as well, because they are really another group that's helping people in the community. But get ready for that special live stream tomorrow night. And I'm going to go ahead and show these poll results. Let's go ahead and put it up there. We can make myself smaller. Okay, here are the results of the poll. Would you donate to or canvass for another progressive candidate for president? 5% said, yes, I want to try inside game. 68% said, no, let's do a different strategy. And 28% said, maybe, depends on the candidate. So, Krystal Ball, I hope that someone shows you this. This is 642 votes. Granted, not as big of an audience as Breaking Point's, obviously, but I do think that is very telling, because I think that shows that not everybody who was a Bernie supporter is still on board for that strategy. So that is good to note. Thank you so much. 14 likes to 700. Smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. I'm going to go to the super chats, and then we got to head out because I know Eric has to go to another show. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. Classism is economic and societal. I continue. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Salgato. Cultural Marxism is a dog whistle for bigots. Ooh. Thank you for this, AJF. Julian Assange is also a class issue. He's a member of the media class that's supposed to stand up and critique the state and corporate classes. I didn't think about it that way, but that's a good point. Thank you for this super chat, Goody. I was a PhD fellow in anthropology. Humans lived in egalitarian communities for 98% of human history. Selfishness as human nature is a lie. Ooh. Shout out to JB. Remember, you have Bernie Sanders, former press secretary, being skeptical about staying within the inside game of running in the Democratic Party. That says a lot. The ship has sailed on dim reformism. That's a good point, JB. Thanks for the super chat, AJF. We need to accept politics as a societal field about alliances, friendships, personalities get in the way of objectivity and policy goals. Thank you for this, John. Sabby, I'll check for your reaction later, but don't you think it's a little odd neither of them have reached out to Bernie for an interview about 2024, his BS about not running? We don't know if they haven't or not. Bernie was on Krystal, Kyle and Friends last year, but we really don't know. I'll tell you one thing about even doing my show. Just because you don't see someone on doesn't mean they weren't invited on. So I do know Bernie's not really going on to much independent media. So there's that too. Thank you for this, Justin. It would seem to me that Krystal Ball's intentions are good. However, being a multimillionaire has a tendency to create distance between her and the folks she advocates on behalf of. Interesting point, Justin. Yasmin, Krystal Ball doesn't have any working class friends. Her friends are the other PMC, Marianne, Nina, and Yang, as she mentioned, name dropped in this interview. Thanks for this, Marta. Why aren't you streaming also on Rumble, Sabby? Because I have to pay to live stream on Rumble, so I usually will just upload it after. That's why. Thanks for this, Justin. Krystal's argument that Bernie had a better chance of winning than Jill. Bernie had zero chance because he wasn't in the election in November, while Jill had a shot to win. That's a good point, Justin. I didn't think about that. And thanks for this as well. Lots of other countries' voting systems are first past the post, like the UK and Canada, but they have more than two parties. Krystal is wrong again. Unfettered corporate money in politics is the issue. Well said. DG Daniels, by the end of this, Krystal ends up making the case against the inside strategy she supports. Yeah, I don't think this interview did what Krystal thinks it did. I really don't. JB says, I got to go, but have a great night. And hopefully after Sabby is finished, you'll catch my interview with presidential candidate John Stasevich tonight. Awesome show, Sabs. Thanks, JB. Yes, check out JB's show. He should be live now. I'm about to hop off. He's interviewing John Stasevich. He was on here before. He's running as an independent for president for 2024. And thank you for this super chat, Frank. Briahna giving Krystal her what the hell ever face. Thank you for the chat with our eyes rise. I want to say our eyes on the prize when I see that. These people are not progressive. U.S. foreign and domestic policy is settler colonialism, and both parties will always support that. Black force reparations. Interesting point. And thanks for this as well. Consciousness, peace, uhuru. Thank you so much. And thank you for this super chat, DG Daniels. Parties help to maintain the status quo by partitioning people into separate teams. So the answer is not more parties. It's independence from parties. And I think Roger Meadows would agree with you on that. So shout out. All right, guys, I can show you some Camp Data stuff tomorrow. I'm over my time. So I am heading out. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you didn't hit the like button, go ahead and do that. You know how we do this, guys. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.